I was driving through my neighborhood this morning, just, doing the school run, and I passed a for sale sign.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of those classic wooden posts hammered into a slightly overgrown lawn, white paint peeling a little bit.
Right.
And I had this moment where I just stared at it at the stop sign.
Just a sign on a lawn?
Right. But it struck me. We look at that sign and we think, oh, someone is moving. Or maybe, I wonder how much they want for it.
Sure. We see a house.
We see a house. We see a family packing boxes.
Yeah.
But what we don't see is the machine.
The machine.
The invisible, colossal, global machine that is actually churning behind that, that piece of painted wood.
Mm.
I realized I didn't actually understand what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sure, I know you pay money and you get keys. But what is actually happening when that sign comes down?
That is the question, isn't it? It is so deceptively simple. We live in these boxes. We work in these boxes. Real estate is the literal background of our entire existence. But the moment you decide to trade one of those boxes, you are stepping into a web that involves international economic modeling, centuries-old philosophy, high-stakes sociology.
And a level of legal complexity that would just make your head spin.
It absolutely would.
And that is exactly what we're doing today. We are peeling back the drywall. We're looking at the wiring. We're taking the topic of the real estate business, which sounds dry, I know.
It can, yeah.
And we are going to find out why the OECD, Karl Marx, and software engineers are all somehow involved in selling a 3-bedroom ranch in the suburbs.
It is a journey from the kitchen table all the way to the United Nations.
So let's ground this before we get too abstract. When we say real estate business, what is the actual definition we're working with here?
Okay.
Because I feel like everyone has a slightly different idea. Some people think it's just flipping houses. Others think it's, being a landlord.
And it's all of those. But strictly speaking, if we look at our source material, the real estate business is defined as the profession of buying, leasing, managing, or selling real estate.
Okay.
It is the mechanism of transfer and management.
Okay. Buying, leasing, managing, selling. That seems straightforward enough.
But that covers a massive, massive spectrum.
Yeah.
You have the obvious one, residential.
That's where you live?
That's where we sleep. That's the for sale sign you saw this morning. That's, the emotional side of the business.
Right.
But then you have commercial office buildings, retail spaces, malls, and that operates on a completely different set of logic.
Right. Nobody buys a strip mall because they fell in love with the lighting.
Exactly. It's purely a yield calculation,
Right.
An investment. Then you have industrial factories, warehouses, logistics centers.
Oh, yeah.
Think about those massive Amazon fulfillment centers you see off the highway. That is a huge chunk of the real estate business.
A huge and growing chunk.
Immensely. And then you have this interesting hybrid that is sort of taking over modern cities, mixed use.
That's the Target on the bottom, condos on the top model.
That's exactly it. Retail or commercial on the ground floor, residential apartments above. It is a way of maximizing the utility of the land, especially in dense urban environments.
It makes sense.
And that is really the core mission of this deep dive. We want to stop looking at these things as just buildings or shelter and start looking at them as assets within a very complex system. We need to understand how efficiently, or in many cases inefficiently, these assets change hands.
And that brings us to the first layer of the onion, the people.
The human element.
Because for all the talk of algorithms and Zillow and online listings, this is still a surprisingly human-heavy industry.
Oh, absolutely.
You can buy a car online pretty easily now. You can buy stocks in a microsecond with thumb swipe. But buying a house, you usually have to talk to someone.
You do. And that is by design. The source material talks a lot about the role of the intermediary.
The middleman, the person taking a cut.
The middleman, or the buffer. In economics, we often talk about friction things that slow down a transaction.
Right.
And usually, the goal of technology is to remove middlemen to reduce that friction. But in real estate, the intermediary is there because the stakes are so high that the friction is almost protective.
That's a good way to put it. It's not like selling a used bike on Craigslist. If I mess up a bike sale, I'm out $50.
Right.
If I mess up a house sale, I'm bankrupt.
Yeah.
Or worse.
Precisely. It is, and the source calls it, common practice for owners to utilize dedicated sales and marketing support in exchange for a commission.
Okay.
They generally don't do it themselves because of what economists call the asymmetric information problem.
Asymmetric information.
Meaning the information isn't symmetrical. The seller knows everything about the house, the leaky pipe, the weird neighbor, the drafty window.
All the secrets.
All the secrets. The buyer knows nothing. The agent is there to help bridge that gap. And crucially, they manage the legal exposure for both sides.
But what I found funny in the research is that while the job is the same everywhere, bridging that gap, marketing the asset, the labels we stick on these people are totally different depending on where you are on the map.
Oh, yes.
It's a bit of a global name game.
It is. And the language reveals a lot about the local culture.
So here in North America, we're very attached to our titles. You have the real estate agent, you have the real estate broker, who is sort of a step above, and then you have the trademarked one, realtor.
Which is an important distinction. It specifically means they are a member of the National Association of Realtors.
Like a club.
It's a trade group membership, not just a job description. It implies a certain code of ethics they've agreed to follow.
Right. But then you hop across the Atlantic to the UK, and the vibe changes completely. They don't have real estate agents.
No.
They have less estate agents.
It does sound more aristocratic, doesn't it? I must ring my estate agent.
It really does. It evokes, I don't know, landed gentry.
Hunting dogs and tweets.
It sounds like they are selling Downton Abbey every Tuesday.
Well, sometimes they are. But the function is identical. However, when you go to Australia, New Zealand, the terminology just fractures even more.
Oh yeah, this is wild.
They have agents, sure, but they also use terms like sales representative, property consultant, or leasing agent.
Or sometimes just simply the agents.
Agent.
Very mysterious.
Property consultant is the one that interests me. That feels like a very deliberate shift in branding.
How so?
Well, agent sounds transactional, I do this for you. But consultant sounds strategic, I think, with you.
That is a very sharp observation. And the industry has absolutely been trying to move toward that advisory role for years.
Why is that?
Because if your only job is opening a door and handing someone a brochure, an app can replace you. A smart lock and a PDF can replace you. But if you are consulting on portfolio strategy and long-term value and neighborhood trends, well, you're harder to automate.
You're providing insight, not just access. Precisely. But essentially, the main takeaway here is that despite the label, whether it's a broker in Manhattan, an estate agent in London, or a property consultant in Sydney, the economic function is universal. They are facilitators of a high-stakes exchange.
They are the oil in this very complicated machine.
A very good way to put it.
Okay, so we have the people. We have the agent, consultant, broker. Now let's talk about what they're actually selling. Because I think this is where most people, myself included, have it completely wrong.
Go on.
Well, if I buy a house, I think I'm buying the house. You know, the bricks, the wood, the roof, the dirt, the questionable wallpaper in the guest room.
A physical object.
Right. But the research made this really specific, almost pedantic distinction. It said a real estate transaction is the process where rights in a unit of property are transferred, not the property itself, the rights.
It's not pedantic at all. It's fundamental. It is the single most important concept in all of property law.
Okay, really?
Absolutely. You are not buying the atoms. You are buying the legal permission to control those atoms in a certain way.
Rights in a unit of property. Unpack that for me. Why does that distinction matter so much to the person listening right now who just wants to buy a condo?
Okay, think of it this way. Imagine you buy a beautiful farmhouse. You sign the papers, you move in, you think you own it.
I'm living the dream.
You're living the dream. But then a mining company shows up and says, we actually own the mineral rights under this land, and we're going to start drilling next Tuesday.
Oh, no.
Or the city says, we own an easement that runs across your backyard for a new sewer line, and we're bringing the backhoes next month.
That's a nightmare.
Or a bank says, actually, there's a lien on this property from the previous owner's unpaid business loan, so we have a claim.
Nightmare fuel.
Total nightmare fuel. If you thought you bought the dirt, you're confused and angry and probably going to court. But if you understood that you bought a specific set of rights, a bundle of them, which might explicitly exclude the minerals or include the easement, then you understand the reality of the situation. You are buying a legal construct, not just a physical object.
So the transaction isn't, here are the keys.
Oh.
It's, Here is a very long, very complicated contract listing exactly what you were allowed to do with this space and who else has a claim on it.
Exactly. And that is why the transaction itself, the process of conveyance, is so incredibly complicated.
Right.
If I sell you a banana, I hand you the banana, the transaction is done. I don't retain peel rights.
Last good point.
You don't have to check if the government has a lien on the banana from a prior owner, but with land. The source points out three main friction points that make real estate harder to trade than almost anything else.
Okay, let's hit those. Friction point number one.
The complexity of the property rights themselves, just what we were talking about. You have to do
Right.
this whole process called a title search to verify that the person selling the house actually owns all the rights they claim to own.
And that nobody else does.
And that nobody else does. This is why we have title insurance. We are terrified that a long-lost cousin from 1890 has a claim on the land because of a will that wasn't probated correctly.
It sounds like a Dickens novel. The mystery of the missing deed.
It often is, which leads to friction point number 2.
The sheer amount of money involved.
Right. It's likely the biggest purchase you will ever make. When you are moving hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, the level of scrutiny just spikes.
Of course.
You need banks, appraisers, inspectors, underwriters. The entire financial system puts up massive guardrails to prevent fraud and money laundering. You can't just Venmo someone $1 million and hope for the best.
I wish you could. It would be easier.
It would be easier, but probably not better.
Probably not. And number 3.
Government regulations, and this is the big one. The source notes that conventions and requirements vary wildly, not just between countries, but between states, counties, even cities.
Right. So what you need to do to sell a condo in New York is completely different from selling a ranch in Texas.
Which is completely different from selling a flat in Paris or a cottage in Kyoto. Every single local government has its own zoning laws, transfer taxes, environmental disclosures, occupancy rules, you name it.
It's a patchwork quilt of red tape.
It is. And all that red tape, all that complexity, all that money creates something that economists are obsessed with: transaction costs.
Okay, transaction costs. Now this sounds like the boring part of the bill where they add the service fees and the fine print.
It can seem that way.
But in the research, this seemed to be a huge focus. This is where the heavy hitters come in.
This is the science of the industry. It's where we move from the local estate agent to the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development.
And my first question is, why? Why does an international economic organization care about the closing costs on my duplex? Like, don't they have bigger fish to fry, like global trade and stuff?
To them, this is global trade. They care because transaction costs are the sand in the gears of the global economy.
How so?
Well, think about it. If it costs too much money or takes too much time to buy and sell property, people stop moving.
They get stuck, literally.
Exactly. Imagine you're an engineer living in Spain and you get a fantastic job offer in Finland, a real career-making opportunity.
Okay.
But selling your house in Spain takes 18 months and costs 15% of the property's value in fees, taxes, and legal bills, and then buying in Finland is a whole separate legal nightmare you don't understand.
I might just stay in Spain.
You might just turn down the job.
Yeah.
So what happened? High transaction costs killed labor mobility.
Ah, I see.
And when labor mobility drops, talent doesn't go where it's most needed. Capital gets stuck in inefficient assets. The whole economy becomes less dynamic. It's a huge drag on GDP.
So this isn't just a personal headache, it's a national economic problem.
It's a massive one. So the OECD and the European Commission actually poured a ton of resources into studying this. They sponsored a study called Improving Competition in Real Estate Transactions.
Right.
They wanted to figure out, how do we even measure these costs accurately across borders? And once we measure them, how do we lower them to make the market deeper and more efficient?
And this is where the research got surprisingly technical. I was not expecting this. I saw the term modeling real property transactions, and I saw UML.
Yes.
Now, I have friends in tech. UML stands for Unified Modeling Language. It's a tool for mapping out software code and systems architecture.
That's right.
Why on earth are they using software engineering tools for property law? That seems like a very weird crossover.
That is the fascinating part. They realized that legal descriptions, the actual written laws, were too vague and too different. If you want to compare the efficiency of Finland's market versus Spain's market, you can't just read the laws.
Too much gets lost in translation.
Exactly. The languages are different. The legal concepts are different. A notary in the United States is someone who just witnesses a signature. A notary in France is a highly trained public official who drafts the contracts and is essential to the transaction. Same word, totally different function.
So they needed a universal translator.
They needed a model, a visual language that was independent of any specific legal text or natural language. So they treated the property buying process like a computer program.
Okay.
They used UML to break it down into use cases. Actor A, the buyer, performs action B, signs a contract, which triggers process C, funds are moved into escrow. They mapped every single step.
It's like creating a flowchart for the law.
Exactly that. By mapping it out in the standardized visual way, they could overlay the process in Denmark with the process in Portugal and see, with perfect clarity, exactly where the extra steps were.
Wow.
They could say, look, in Denmark, this step takes 2 days and involves one person, but in Portugal, the same logical step takes 3 weeks and involves 4 different people and 3 different government offices.
That's wild. It's like debugging the housing market.
It is. They even use what's called an ontology-based methodology.
Okay, ontology. Now we're back in philosophy class again. That's the study of being, right?
It is, but in information science, an ontology is something very specific. It's a formal, explicit specification of a shared conceptualization.
I have no idea what you just said.
Laughs, fair enough. It's a shared vocabulary. It's getting everyone to agree on exactly what transfer of deed means, what its properties are, and how it relates to mortgage registration.
Okay.
It's about creating a dictionary of concepts so that when you collect data, it's actually comparable. Without an ontology, you're comparing apples to oranges. With it, you're comparing standardized data points.
So it's about extreme precision in language to allow for clean data.
Exactly.
And did this high-tech approach actually yield results? Or was it just an academic exercise for people who really love charts?
Oh, it yielded very specific data, particularly in the Nordic countries. The source material specifically mentions the Nordic connection, Finland and Denmark.
Right.
They used this modeling in conjunction with something called the System of National Accounts to calculate exactly how much of their gross domestic product was being eaten up by these property transfer processes.
They put a price tag on the paperwork.
A very precise price tag. And they found that by digitizing their records and standardizing their processes, by removing that friction we talked about, they could save significant amounts of national wealth. We're talking billions of dollars.
Wow. So it has a real-world impact.
A massive one. And for anyone who is really, really into land registry law,
There must be dozens of us.
the source notes that there is a detailed English translation of the Danish conveyance and mortgaging model available. You can actually see the flowcharts.
I'll be sure to add that to my beach reading list right next to the thriller novels. The Danish Land Registry Conveyance Model. Sounds like a real page-turner.
It might be dry, but that dryness is where the efficiency hides. And if you can shave even 1% off transaction costs in a national real estate market, you are saving billions. That pays for a lot of schools and hospitals.
Okay, so we've established that it's expensive and complicated to move the rights around. But let's zoom back in a bit and talk about the number that everyone actually cares about.
The price.
The price, the value. What makes a house worth what it's worth? Why is a shack in San Francisco worth more than a mansion in rural Ohio?
The eternal question.
The research says there are 3 main pillars: structural, locational, and environmental.
Correct. These are the classic determinants of value in real estate appraisal.
So structural seems easy enough. That's the house itself. How many bedrooms, how many bathrooms? Is the roof leaking? Do you have that weird 70s shag carpet that smells like old cigarettes?
Right. The physical attributes of the improvement on the land, the square footage, the age of the building, the quality of the materials, the layout. That's the tangible part you can touch and measure.
Then you have locational, which is the old cliche. Location, location, location.
Right. And this is usually the biggest single driver of price.
So this is things like, how close are you to the city center? Are you in a good school district? Is there a train station nearby?
Exactly. It's about proximity, distance to amenities, transport links, major job centers. The key here is that you can change the structure, you can renovate a kitchen, but you can't change the location. You can't move your house closer to the good school.
Very true. But the third one, environmental, feels a bit more nuanced. How is that different from location? It sounds similar.
It's a subtle but really important distinction. Think of location as objective coordinates on a map. This house is 1.2 miles from the train station.
Okay.
Think of environment as the more subjective, contextual, and sensory experience of that location.
Give me an example.
Okay, you can have 2 houses in the same great location, both a mile from the train station, but one is next to a beautiful, quiet park. The other is next to a noisy factory that runs all night.
Got it.
The environmental attributes are things like, Is there a park next door? Is there a highway down the street? What is the air quality like? Is there a view of the mountains or a view of a dumpster? Crime rates, noise pollution,
The vibe.
the vibe, or the quality of life. It's all the stuff that doesn't show up on a simple map but deeply affects how it feels to live there.
So you can have a house in the great location, central downtown, but with a terrible environment because it's next to a construction site and the air quality is bad.
Precisely. And what's really cool is how we are starting to measure this stuff now. It used to be very fuzzy, but the source mentioned a specific case study from Tehran.
Yeah, this caught my eye. They use web mining. What is that?
This represents the modernization of valuation. Traditionally, a tax assessor would come by your house once every few years, look at the outside, maybe check the last sale price, and guess.
And it was always wrong. Either too high or too low.
Often, yes, it was a very blunt instrument. But the Tehran study used web mining techniques. They wrote algorithms to scrape vast amounts of data from online property listings, from real estate forums, maybe even social media discussions about neighborhoods.
So they're effectively crowdsourcing the valuation.
They're using big data to detect the determinants of value in real time. An official assessor might not know that a specific street just got a trendy new coffee shop and a yoga studio that boosted values by 5%.
But the web knows.
The web knows. The algorithms can pick up on keywords in property descriptions, words like sunny, quiet, stunning view, newly renovated, and correlate those words with higher selling prices. They can quantify the value of the vibe.
It's amazing how tech has infiltrated every single part of this. We've gone from a handshake deal to web mining and UML diagrams. It's not just an art anymore. It is really becoming a hard science.
It is becoming a data science, and the companies that have the best data on environmental factors, on transaction costs, on structural attributes are the ones who are winning the market.
Speaking of the market, I want to zoom out because we've been talking mostly about houses and offices, pretty standard stuff. But when I looked at the See Also section of our research, the part most people skip, I realized the sheer mind-boggling breadth of this business.
It is a universe of different asset classes. Real estate touches absolutely everything.
Let's just run through some of these because the few of them really surprised me. For example, we have healthcare real estate.
A huge and very specific sector. You can't just turn an old office building into a modern hospital.
Why?
The infrastructure requirements are insane. The ventilation systems for operating rooms, the reinforced floor loads for heavy MRI machines, the backup power generation, the specialized plumbing. It is highly, highly specialized.
And I imagine with an aging population.
With the silver tsunami, as it's called, this is one of the hottest sectors for institutional investment. Everyone needs more clinics and senior living facilities.
Okay, what about garden real estate? That sounds quaint.
It's niche, but it can be extremely valuable. These are plots of land with significant horticultural value. Not just a nice backyard, but, professional botanical gardens, productive orchards, or historically significant landscapes.
I see. Then there's the more familiar stuff like vacation property and golf property.
Lifestyle assets, and they are very sensitive to the economy. When things are good and people have disposable income, golf courses and vacation homes, boom.
And when things are bad.
They're just very expensive pieces of grass that need a lot of water and maintenance. They're often the first luxury to be cut.
Then we have luxury real estate, which is practically its own reality TV genre at this point.
Indeed. And it operates on completely different principles. It's often what's called a Veblen good, meaning that sometimes the higher price makes it more desirable, not less. The value comes from the status it conveys, the exclusivity.
Right, it's expensive because it's expensive.
Exactly.
And then, my personal favorite from the list, I had to read this twice to make sure it wasn't a typo, extraterrestrial real estate.
Yes. That is on the list.
I mean, come on. Are we really talking about buying condos on Mars? Is that a real thing?
Theoretically, yes. People are already trying to sell plots of land on the moon. There are websites where you can buy an acre of the moon right now.
But do you actually own it? Or are you just buying a fancy piece of paper for your wall?
That is the massive, unresolved legal debate. The 1967 Outer Space Treaty says that no nation can claim sovereignty over celestial bodies.
Okay, so no country can plant a flag and say the moon is ours.
Correct. But the treaty doesn't explicitly say that private individuals or corporations can't. So you have these companies that are exploiting that perceived loophole.
Wow.
But the fact that it's even categorized as a type of real estate shows you where the head of the industry is at. They're always looking for new inventory and, well, we're running out of land on Earth.
For sale. Crater view, low gravity, no atmosphere. Slight radiation risk. A real fixer-upper.
But think about the transaction costs there. There's no government to regulate it yet, no zoning laws, no title insurance.
A libertarian paradise until the oxygen runs out.
Precisely. But it really points to the speculative, forward-looking nature of the business.
Which brings us back down to earth and to the more corporate side of things.
Hmm.
The list also highlighted the incredible financialization of all this. This is where real estate stops being a place to live and starts being a line item on a spreadsheet. We saw terms like private equity real estate and REITs.
REITs, real estate investment trusts, are fascinating because they essentially democratize the landlord experience.
How so?
Well, you and I probably can't afford to buy a skyscraper in Manhattan that costs billions of dollars.
Definitely not.
But we can buy a share of a REIT that owns that skyscraper and 100 others. It trades on the stock market just like a share of Apple.
And you get a dividend.
Exactly. You get a dividend from the rent the tenants pay. It turns a physical, illiquid, lumpy building into a liquid financial asset that you can buy or sell in seconds.
And then there's land banking. That one sounds a little ominous.
It can be controversial. That's the practice of buying undeveloped land on the outskirts of a city, not to use it, but just to hold it.
For what purpose?
You're making a bet that the city will eventually expand toward your empty field. So you just sit on it for 20 years, do nothing with it, maybe let some cows graze on it to keep the taxes low.
And then you sell it for a fortune when the developers finally arrive.
Exactly. You're monetizing patience and foresight.
Or you're hoarding a critical resource and driving up prices for everyone else.
Or you're hoarding a resource. It really depends on your perspective.
Which is a perfect segue to the dark side. Because you can't have a serious discussion about this industry without talking about when it goes horribly wrong.
No, and you shouldn't. Real estate is cyclical,
Right.
and because it's so closely tied to our homes and our life savings, when it crashes, it hurts people in a very direct way.
The source lists the obvious one. Real estate bubbles.
And the inevitable pop. The subprime mortgage crisis of 2008, that was a catastrophic failure of the entire machine we've been describing. The intermediaries failed, the valuation models failed, the financial risk assessment failed, the regulators failed.
And the cost wasn't just transaction costs on a spreadsheet. It was millions of people losing their homes. It was a global recession.
Absolutely. And the list in the source also included the more chronic social issues: gentrification, urban decay, eviction, foreclosure.
And it implied things like slumlords through the mentions of related topics like just cause eviction and rent regulation.
Right. It's a reminder that this isn't just a game of Monopoly. When you treat housing strictly as a financial asset to be optimized for maximum yield, you often end up squeezing the actual human beings who live inside the asset.
It's a fundamental tension, isn't it? Housing as a human right versus housing as an investment vehicle.
That is the central tension of modern urban economics. If housing is a great investment, that means prices are going up. If prices are going up, it becomes less affordable as shelter. You can't easily have it both ways.
Which I think is the perfect bridge to the final and arguably most dense part of our research, the theory. Because ultimately, all of this, the buying, selling, evicting, mining, the space colonization, it all rests on a very old, very deep philosophical question. Who owns the ground?
And we are back to the bundle of rights.
I love this phrase. It sounds like something from a fable. The old man went to the market with his bundle of rights.
It's the standard metaphor in property law, and it's a crucial one. When you say, I own this land, you don't really own the land in an absolute godlike sense. You possess a bundle of sticks.
A bundle of sticks.
And each stick in that bundle represents a specific, separable right.
Okay, let's name some of the sticks. If I'm holding this bundle for a typical house, what have I got?
Okay, stick one. Air rights. Do you own the space above your house all the way up to the stars? Can you build a 50-story tower? Can your neighbor build a balcony that hangs over your yard? In a place like New York City, air rights are a tradable currency. Smaller, historic buildings will sell their unused air rights to the building next door so they can build a super tall skyscraper.
That is wild. You're selling the empty air above your roof.
You are! Okay, stick two. Mineral rights. The oil, the gold, the natural gas under your feet. In many countries, the state automatically keeps this stick. You own the surface, the king or the government owns the gold.
But not in the U.S.
In the U.S., unique among many nations, the landowner often keeps this stick, which is why you can have individuals getting rich off oil found on their property.
Which explains the Beverly Hillbillies.
It explains the Beverly Hillbillies. Stick three. Water rights or riparian rights. If a creek runs through your property, can you Damn it. Can you divert all the water? Can you drain the aquifer underneath to water your almond farm? This is a source of massive conflict, especially in the American West right now.
Then you have things like grazing rights.
Can you put cows on it? Can you farm it? What can you grow?
So ownership is really just holding this handful of permissions, and you can sell them off one by one. I can sell the mineral stick to Exxon, the grazing stick to a local farmer, and I can keep the air stick and live in a treehouse.
Theoretically, yes. And that is why the legal models we talked about earlier, the UML diagrams and the ontologies, are so necessary. You have to have a robust system to track who has which stick. If you lose track, you have chaos.
And it's not just what you own, but how you own it. The source listed so many different forms of ownership: private, public, collective, cooperative.
Right. Common ownership. Crown ownership, which is still a major thing in the UK, Canada, Australia, and my personal favorite, unowned.
Unowned. That feels rare in today's world.
It is. Antarctica is largely unowned by treaty. The high seas are unowned. It refers to terra nullius, nobody's land.
But this all leads us to the heavy hitters in theory,
Ah.
because people have been arguing about this for a long time. The source lists the scholars who have spent centuries debating this: John Locke, Adam Smith, Karl Marx, Elinor Ostrom.
It is an absolute powerhouse list of thinkers.
It's just wild to me to see Karl Marx and Adam Smith on the same guest list for a real estate party. They don't seem like they'd get along very well.
They wouldn't, but they are both fundamental architects of how we think about land and property today.
So how does Adam Smith fit in?
Adam Smith, the father of capitalism, was obsessed with how land generates wealth. He analyzed rent not as just a payment, but as one of the three foundational sources of income, along with profit and wages. He tried to understand where that value came from.
And Marx?
Marx came at it from the opposite direction. He analyzed how the private ownership of land creates and enforces class structures. He argued that land ownership was a primary way for the wealthy, the bourgeoisie, to extract value from the labor of the workers, the proletariat.
If you own the land, you control the means of survival for everyone else.
That was his argument. And that fundamental tension is still with us today in every landlord-tenant dispute and every debate about affordable housing.
What about John Locke? Where does he come in?
Locke gave us the labor theory of property. He had this very influential idea that because you own your own body, and therefore your own labor, when you mix your labor with something in nature, when you till a field or build a fence, you make it your own. You earn the right to that land.
The philosophical basis for homesteading.
Yeah,
You worked it, so it's yours.
exactly. It's a cornerstone of American property law.
And Elinor Ostrom, she's a Nobel Prize winner.
Right.
But more recent.
Yes, and her work is so important. She's famous for challenging the tragedy of the commons.
Okay, you have to remind us what the tragedy of the commons is.
The classic idea, the parable, is that if you have a shared pasture, a common, that everyone is allowed to use, everyone will act in their own self-interest. Every farmer will add one more sheep to graze, because the benefit of that extra sheep is personal and private, more wool for me, but the cost, the grass being eaten, is shared by everyone.
So eventually the pasture is destroyed.
The pasture is destroyed. The tragedy is that rational individual freedom leads to collective ruin.
And for a long time, the argument was that we need private property to save the land. This is my piece, so I'll take care of it.
That was the old argument. The only solutions were believed to be hard privatization or hard government control. Ostrom came along and said, hold on, actually, let's look at the real-world data.
And what did she find?
She studied hundreds of real-world examples: Swiss villages managing alpine meadows, Japanese forests, irrigation systems in Spain. And she found that, contrary to the theory, communities are often very, very good at managing commons without private ownership or heavy government regulation.
Oh.
They create their own rules, their own social contracts, monitoring systems, and sanctions for cheaters. They figure it out.
So we don't always need a landlord or a policeman. Sometimes neighbors just work it out amongst themselves.
Exactly. Her work provides this fascinating and powerful counterpoint to the everything must be privately owned mentality that dominates so much of modern real estate.
So really, every time we sign a lease or a mortgage, we are unknowingly taking a side in a 300-year-old philosophical debate.
We are. We just don't realize it because we are too busy worrying about the interest rate and the home inspection report.
And whether the roof is going to leak?
And the roof. Always. Always the roof.
This has been massive. I mean, we started with a simple sign on a lawn. We went through software modeling of Danish property laws. We looked at crowdsourced home values in Tehran. We visited the moon. And we ended up in a debate with Karl Marx and Elinor Ostrom.
As all good deep dives should, we took the familiar and hopefully made it strange and interesting again.
So if we have to synthesize all of this for the listener, the person who just wants to understand the world they live in a little better, what is the headline?
The headline is that real estate is the ultimate convergence point. It is where high stakes, abstract, global finance meets intensely local, personal human interaction.
Okay.
It is where the system of national accounts, those big OECD studies trying to put a price tag on the entire nation, meets the very personal bundle of rights that defines your home. It is not just a business, it is the physical operating system of our society.
The hidden complexity behind the simple things.
Exactly, and understanding that complexity gives you agency. When you know you are buying rights, not just bricks, you make better decisions. When you understand transaction costs, you understand a big piece of the economy.
Before we go, I want to leave everyone with that one final, slightly provocative thought that we hinted at earlier.
Go for it.
We talked about extraterrestrial real estate, and we talked about unowned property, and we just talked about the tragedy of the commons.
That is a dangerous cocktail of concepts.
Well, as we continue to use up space and resources here on Earth, and as those transaction costs get higher and the regulations get denser, we are going to look up. We're going to go to Mars and beyond.
It seems inevitable.
But here's the question. When we get there, do we bring John Locke and Adam Smith with us? Does the bundle of rights that we developed over centuries on Earth even apply in a vacuum?
That is the big question. Can you own air rights where there is no air? Can you have riparian rights to a river of frozen methane?
Exactly. Are we just going to replicate the same system there? Landlords, tenants, mortgages, title insurance for moon craters? Or will we have a chance to invent an entirely new way of defining ownership, maybe an Ostrom-style commons for a whole planet?
That is the ultimate test for all of these theories, and I have a sneaking suspicion that the lawyers are already drafting the paperwork, just in case.
Something for you to mull over the next time you look up at the night sky. You might just be looking at a future legal battleground.
Indeed.
Thanks for diving in with us. This was a heavy one, but I feel like I understand the world I'm standing on a lot better now.
It was a real pleasure.
We'll catch you on the next one.
Goodbye, everyone.